So I'll kick things off with an easy question, which is what, for each of you, was the inspiration to get involved in environmental issues? Was there a person? Was there a book? Was there a environmental tragedy in your community that inspired you to get involved? I will turn this to Representative Wolkins first.
Talk about a loaded question. I got involved in environmental issues for all the wrong reasons. When I first came in, I give Senator Vice Simpson credit for being involved in environmental issues. When I came in 1988, Senator Simpson, which I think probably most of you know, pretty good environmentalist herself, she was on a wetlands. She was basically going to take all wetlands off the table and everything else. And my county, we have 103 lakes, and about half the county is wetlands. And that's basically what we grow our 175 bushel corn on, are these wetlands. So I got involved more to play defense against Senator Simpson than I did actually out of wanting to do something in the environmental area. So I got started for all the wrong reasons. I enjoyed it. I've met a lot of neat people, and I've enjoyed being in that area, but that's how I got started.
I think I've been sort of an environmentalist my entire life. Even my mother, you know, in the 1950s would not approve of DDT, and that was way before Rachel Carson. So I've always been interested in those kind of issues, and then I moved to the Indiana Dunes, and I don't need to say anything else. That sort of forged my thought on this, and when I got down to the Senate, I took someone's spot on the environmental committee, and I stayed there for 7 years, so thank you.
The question to you both, though, is there's going to be the mindset on a portion of the environmental community, I think it's fair to say, that are frustrated by the pace of change, the sense that we're not transitioning quickly enough to less polluting sources of energy. We seem to be stymied in even giving authorization to one small community, not one small community, but one community of many, to even have the opportunity to vote on mass transit. And there's a sense that, you know, if I'm a young professional deciding between a number of different communities with which I want to live, I'm seeing this. I'm seeing the fact that there may be substantial deregulation of industrial livestock operations in Indiana if this controversial constitutional amendment would pass. What do you say to that young professional to say, yeah, in the backdrop of all these challenges, this is why you should stay in Indiana?
Indiana is a very conservative. We are not very good at change and things like that. As far as the mass transit, I think it's going to be very difficult to get it done because there have been so many cases where mass transit, unless you have the major population willing to buy into it, it costs a ton of money. And, you know, Indiana, we're pretty frugal, and so I think the mass transit is that's the reason the majority of the opposition has been to it, is that they think that it will not be sustainable as far as financial. It does create lots of good opportunities. It does help the environment when you have people riding more than one or two in a car and so forth. So if you had that, but I think you have to look at all the other things that Indiana has to offer to get these folks to come here. I mean, we have not sure how to say it. We have a good quality of living here. We have a low cost of living. We have low wages that go along with it. I understand that, but folks that are from Indiana like Indiana, and I guess we just have to sell the positive points that we have. As far as the quality of life, I think we have safe communities here in Indiana. Fairly low unemployment rate up in our area. I happen to come from Warsaw. We've always had a very low unemployment rate, mainly because of the orthopedic industry that's there in Warsaw and so forth. So we basically, the Indiana that I see has pretty low unemployment rate, good recreational opportunities here in the city. Of course, you got the Colts, the Pacers, lots of different college things going on. We don't have too many arts type things out in the rural communities, but most of us live within 30, 40 miles of a Fort Wayne, South Bend, or a city like that where we can have those opportunities as well. But as a lifelong resident of Indiana, I lived 1 year in California. There's just something about living here. I feel safe, and it's those type things that I think it adds for a good quality of living.
I've been sitting here trying to figure out whether this question is a pragmatic question or a philosophical question. Trying to tell young people why they should stay in Indiana, it's like asking me why I keep going to Indianapolis when I'm a Democrat in a super minority. It's like, why do you keep beating your head against the wall? And the answer is somebody has to do it. And you can I do believe, I really do believe, I have hope that you can do it if you are absolutely relentless, if you know what you're talking about to the point where eventually people will ask you people will ask you your opinion, but you have to be relentless. And so I say to young kids, you can't just sit and kvetch about what things it is that you don't like. Indiana can be a great place, but if you don't like it, fix it, make it better, and do other things. And so that's what I tell my children. I've got two of my three stayed in Indiana. One of them went to Montana, but I can't hardly blame her. She's got a great gig out there with the National Park Service. So I think that there are reasons to stay in Indiana, and if there are reasons not to, fix them. That's where I come from with this.
Well, like I said, I think that's a segue where you said, Senator Tallian, about the issue of, well, if there's something you don't like, fix it. So I want to talk a little bit about proactive, and we will get to the next legislative session and what you see going on. But if you had your way, mindful, and well, I'll ask this question first to Senator Tallian, just for balance here. Senator Tallian, if you had your way, you had the votes, mindful where you are in terms of being in the super minority, if you had the votes, what would be the one environmental issue that you would champion? What would be your big proactive initiative? What would be the Tallian legacy?
I think a couple of things. I think that the transportation issues are really important. We do spend way too much money on roads and not enough on other things. I am from the Northwest Indiana, and we are trying to expand our train. And I'm going to be a little bit snotty here. It's typical of the people from Indianapolis to not know that. The other thing that I think that I would probably say is that I really do believe that energy efficiency is an attainable goal, and I would probably start pushing there.
Energy independence, I would like to see us get away from the coal-fired power plants, but you're not going to like this one. You're not going to like this one. I would support nuclear. I've had an opportunity to. That's what I figured. Last week I had the opportunity to go up. Well, right now I would put it in Yucca Mountain. Is what I would do with it. But okay.
All right.
It's all right.
We keep our decorum here.
2 weeks ago, I had the opportunity to go up to Cook Nuclear and tour that facility and saw what was happening there. And that basically is clean energy. They're storing their waste on site at the present time. Their pools are full and so forth. The other thing I think that I would probably like to figure out how to make recycling so it is economically feasible.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Yeah, I would like to figure out some way to make recycling so it is economically justifiable.
Our Indiana Department of Natural Resources has increased commercial logging and road building by 1,000% in our state forests in the last 10 years. Would you support legislation to set aside the 3 backcountry areas in these state forests established by governor, or to provide wilderness recreation from logging and road building? They only comprise 5% of the state forests.
I don't have an answer for that because I really don't know the facts. And I like to know all the facts before I answer questions like that. So I'm sorry, I just don't know that issue.
I'd have to see the reasons why we shouldn't do it, because I have a place out in Arizona and we have lots of wilderness areas and so forth around there. And 2 years ago we had the Wallow Fire, which totally wiped out everything in our area. It was the largest fire in the history of the state, wiped out everything. If you go by the Indian reservations, they clean out the underbrush in their forests and so forth, and they did not have the problem. I was out there a month ago, and we had a 5-inch rain in a 2-hour period. It was a 100-year flash flood that wiped out everything down there because there was nothing on the mountains to hold it. So I'd have to have more information, but at this point, I probably would tend not to support that.
One question which has puzzled me for a few years is the fact that, as you pointed out, Chairman Wolkins, there's, a very conservative tenor to the Indiana General Assembly. And even when the Democrats were in control of the House, it still had that conservative tenor when it came to energy issues. Why is there not more political interest in energy efficiency? And let me maybe ask the question in a little bit more pointed way, which is that we have heard rumors that there might be an effort to weaken the statewide energy efficiency program that Governor Daniels directed to be put in place in 2009, that there might be legislation that would move forward there. And that just seems counterintuitive, given that it seems like a natural extension of being conservative is to be really frugal, like you said, to use your word, with respect to all sorts of natural resources, of all energy, particularly with energy costs increasing so substantially in such a short period of time in our state.
I haven't heard any talk about undoing any of those goals that he had as far as that goes, but there hasn't been a whole lot of discussion as to what's going to happen in the environmental area this year. Last week I got a call from the governor, and because I'm still not totally sure what his agenda is. I think in the next 2 weeks he's going to be unveiling it. But he asked me if I would carry a recyclable bill, and I told him yes, but I have no idea what's in it at this point yet. I think probably the incentive has not been there because we have some of the cheapest electricity in the U.S., mainly because of our coal-fired power plants. And until people see a real need or a crisis or something, they don't get excited about it. So I don't know that I can really answer other than the fact that we have cheap electricity now, and until something better comes along that comes close to matching the price of our electricity, I just don't see that many people getting excited about it.
Because we're such an industrial intensive state, and a lot of those industries are very energy dependent, and so therefore they would be vulnerable to this big rise in energy prices we've faced in Indiana. I mentioned a statistic to the crowd a couple hours ago that Indiana energy prices have increased by 50% over a 10-year period in our state. That's not for any one customer class, it's for all customer classes. It seems like that's the emergency that would, ought to spur some type of legislative action. And while you pause on that, I don't want to leave Senator Tallian out of the conversation here. So what is your theory for why we're not seeing that kind of proactive leadership on efficiency?
I think that, well, efficiency is like one of those feel-good questions. Do you want to be efficient? Oh, yes. Everybody wants to be efficient. So I don't think that there's a public policy against it. The question is how, and then you get details. You get a bill that says we want you to do X, Y, and Z, and then you start to get fights. So I'm not sure that efficiency isn't a sort of globally agreed upon public policy. It's just that we haven't seen specific bills. Now, I remember a few years ago we had one that would green the public buildings, the state buildings. So we were going to, but the details of that bill went a little farther than anybody could sell. Oh, we had to have, you know, I don't remember what the numbers, but it was going to be 100% more efficient. Well, nobody can do that. And then you started a real argument, and it just sort of fell through the wayside. So I think that we always do better with very specific bills to do very specific things and not too much at once.
The, what you were talking about, if I remember right, Senator Tallian, all of our buildings had to be green buildings, LEED standards and so forth. And I think the governor pretty much preempted it by coming out with a policy. Rather than having it put in law, he decided to come out and make it the policy of his administration. And I don't know whether that's changed or not. What was the question?
Well, again, yeah, why is inefficiency? You know, and so again, to be a little bit more specific, PACE legislation is something that was a topic of conversation a couple of hours ago, and I had several people. I chaired that panel, and several people asked basically the same question: why is an issue that's voluntary in terms of counties participating and voluntary in terms of property owners participating not an issue that would resonate with Republicans as a great way of cutting down the energy consumption of buildings?
Is that the one where the banks were quite upset about? The banks don't want anybody getting in front of them on mortgages, and I believe most PACE legislation that comes ahead of the mortgage, and so the banking industry was very much opposed to that. And I think that's, I think if they could figure out how that the payback there was not in front of the banks, I think it possibly could be done. But that was the big problem as to why that didn't happen.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, I remember when you guys came to me about that, and it was several years ago, and that was the first thing I said is, oh my God, how are we going to get around the banking industry, and what are you going to do about all of that? I heard something here today that probably changed my mind, that said that most of the PACE legislation that's out there now is industrial and commercial, and they're getting bank authorization or lien release or whatever, and it's like, oh, all right, come to me now. I'll be happy to endorse that, because I think that got around something. But let me say this. You guys brought up, you guys have been talking about energy efficiency for a long time. We didn't get a bill. We got a policy from the governor. And as a member of the budget committee, you know, every state big project has to come through budget committee to get approval. And for the past 4 or 5 years, we have been seeing them. So a lot of our Department of Corrections, Department of Administration, I mean, they're doing this, even though you may not see it. A lot of things have been upgraded. LED lights have been put in everywhere. So they're doing a lot of things even without the legislation, but it's because people like you have made it a really visible topic.
Well, I'll agree that there's certainly different demonstration projects that exemplify that kind of retrofitting across the state, but the scale of the investment and efficiency is not, on a per capita basis, comparable to other states by any measure. And the thing that puzzles, I think, a lot of people in this room is that you have comparably conservative states like Texas, Arkansas, and Utah that have passed PACE legislation with very similar attributes to ours. So there's almost a sense that Indiana is even more conservative than even the most conservative states. But I just, well, I'll just leave that as commentary there. And we'll get back to this, but here's a question from the audience. In the face of global climate change with such devastating consequences for our children and grandchildren, what will resonate with Republicans in Indiana to take action to dramatically reduce our carbon emissions?
I would say, speaking as a Republican, Republicans aren't totally convinced that this whole thing is man-made. You know, your side says the science is complete, everybody agrees and so forth, but we keep getting papers from the conservative think tanks and so forth that basically not everybody does agree. As far as some of those world compacts and thing, until you get some of the other countries tying into it, what we do, I don't think it's going to make any difference at all. Until you get India and China and some of those actually reducing their greenhouse emissions. I'm not totally convinced that the science is complete, that it's over with, that everybody agrees with it. And I think that probably is general thinking among a lot of my side of the aisle, the Republican conservatives. I know the Karen side, probably 90% of you do feel that it is man-made, it is creating these super hurricanes and all that, but our side isn't convinced yet.
Whether you're convinced about long-term global climate change factors, I don't know that that's really the question. What we see right now is, I have a friend who teaches every year in China, and she told me last year, when she came back, I will never go back to Beijing again. You can't even breathe. So we know what's really sitting out there right now. The question is, I think, it's really hard for people here to say, oh, you know, we should do all these things here to fix ourselves when places like China have such a mess. And so I think that they're looking at short-term, why should I fix my problem when he's got a much bigger problem? I think that's part of the mentality that we have to figure out a way to get around, argue around, be persuasive about.
Well, I don't want to belabor the topic of climate change, but it's obviously in the minds of probably the majority of people in this audience. It's probably the dominant issue of concern. And I guess a follow-up question to you both, or actually I'll ask one question to you, Representative Wolkins, on this, and then one to you, Senator Tallian, is what does it say about the state of our society today, where an institution like the National Academy of Sciences, which probably draws people of both political affiliations in terms of their private lives, when the National Academy of Sciences or the American Meteorological Society, these are not foreign institutions, but American institutions, are willing to come up with a pretty unambiguous statement saying that climate change, that global warming is real and it's driven primarily by human activity. What does it say about the state of our scientific institutions in this country when this long-time credible science institution is entrusted as the premier body of knowledge on science within a portion of the Republican Party?
I haven't seen that information. That's the first I've heard that they both are totally claiming that there is a connection. Oh, yeah. Are they? Okay. All right. I know I don't have a whole lot of confidence in that European one where they fudged the numbers and did some other things and so forth. And those are the type of things that we hear about, mainly because it bolsters our argument that it's not complete. So I guess I don't have a response for that.
I guess you're getting at an issue that a lot of policymakers wrestle with, which is the issue of equity, right? You know, how much responsibility should be in the hands of the American government versus foreign countries? Am I accurately restating your perspective or your question? Yeah. Okay, and I guess so the follow-up to that is, what do you say, I think that a politically astute environmental community says, yes, that's a fair concern because the American economy is in very bad shape. 50 million people are on some measures under the poverty level in the United States. So we can't do anything so drastic that it will lead to an even graver economic condition. But that being the case, America has historically been the dominant greenhouse gas emitter. And should we not then have proportional responsibility and actually be in a leadership role in cutting greenhouse gas emissions, if in the sense that if you were to quantify all the greenhouse gas emissions that every nation of the world has emitted, we'd be at the top.
I was not arguing with you. The previous question you asked me was, what did I think was somebody else's opinion? Yes, I mean, I still do think that America is a leader, and that we need to be leading by example. And if it means, boy, it's a good thing I'm not in the Congress, so this is not a national thing, but if it means that we have to do trade sanctions or whatever else to get other countries to, to do the kind of things that we want to do. So, in other words, it doesn't do any good for Indiana to shut down all its coal-fired plants and then ship all of our coal to China. So we don't want to do that either. And so this needs to be a combined thing. Yes, I think that the United States needs to step up, be a leader on this, but we also need to make sure that we're not making it easy for other people to not do what we're trying to do.
I think we are a leader. I mean, if you look at the condition, I mean, with the Clean Air Act and the Clean Water, what we've done, we're a whole lot cleaner and better than we were 25, 30 years ago. And so I think we are a good example. Our water is cleaner. There's no question about that. EPA continues ratcheting down all the numbers of all the pollutants you can put out. So I think in one sense we are a leader in the environmental area.
Again, I'm kind of speaking to this issue of SGR 7, the right to farm amendment. Do you think it's justified for us to enshrine into Article 1 of the Indiana Constitution permanent protection for factory farms or CAFOs as it's called?
My answer to that is number 139. 139 is the number of proposals for constitutional amendments that have been filed since I came to the legislature in 2006. I think it's appalling that we keep doing these constitutional things. And I have never yet voted for any of them.
Yeah, I'm not sure what all you see happening with that right to hunt and fish and so forth. I know it was prompted by, I guess I didn't know that it was so much the CAFO situation that prompted it. We have a lot of CAFOs in Indiana. There are a lot of people to feed. I have basically supported CAFOs as long as they meet all the specs and so forth that IDEM puts out on them. Your question is, should it be in our Constitution? You know, there are people that go clear out on both ends of every issue, and the reason this was brought forth, I think, probably was because of some rabid environmentalists or somebody that tried to stop all of that. Mainly the PETA folks, basically, is who they were after. I guess it wasn't environmentalists; it was the PETA folks. Sorry to put you in that class. I didn't mean to. I think we had last year, and I think I did support it, if I'm not mistaken. And I'll take another look at it, but at this point, I probably will still continue to support it. Like I said, there are too many radicals on both sides of issues, and they come out, and the CAFOs that are doing a good job, I think they ought to be able to operate. We've had a couple bad situations up there in Huntington. That guy from Holland or whoever it was, that was a horrible operation. I think they finally got him shut down, and it took a while, and maybe we need to beef up some of our rules and regulations to go after those guys. But farmers have a right to make a living, and we need to feed people, and so I haven't been opposed to large-scale family operations, because a small guy in farming cannot make it, whether he's whether he's a grain farmer or livestock, and so I have tended to support those.
One question posed by students is, how can we as students capture the attention of the legislature? And maybe I'll ask a little bit more of a specific question there, because I know you could always say, well, write to my legislator, email my legislator, meet with my legislator. Maybe another way of asking this question, and no offense to the person who asked the question, hoping it might elicit more thought, more ideas here, is, you know, if students across the state crystallized around one great environmental issue, how do you think they could best be able to actually see it, translate it into public policy?
I think at the time that if there's a bill filed or something, show up at the State House and actually participate in the process. I know, is it Franklin University that had the D-Portage? One of the colleges or universities has a program where they actually, the students are actually in the State House for the whole time we're there, and it's an amazing program. They actually get to testify on behalf, and they have done a fantastic job. They are well prepared when they come, because I've been in a number of committees where they have actually testified and actually had input into what's going. But what we do at the State House is wide open. If there's a hearing, you can come in, sign up, and give your opinions on it, and I would encourage you to do that.
We had a group that comes in every year, and they focus in a couple areas of criminal justice, and they are always way more prepared than most of the other people who come in to testify. They come in with charts and this and that and the other thing, and they're very articulate, and we're always like, wow, that was a great presentation. A couple of things that I was going to say when you were doing your lobby thing. You know, there are a couple of things that I do want people to know about. I once had a whole group of people come into my office and said, oh, Senator Tallian, we really like Senate Bill 290, and we want you to support it, and we think this is a great bill, and da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And I looked at them and I said, now, do you realize that I wrote that? So, know what you're doing when you come in, and keep track of the changes, because sometimes a bill will go from bad to better or from good to terrible. And if you don't keep track of what is going on, you may be coming in lobbying on a position that's already like last week. So,
if you could share, and this is something, again, that is feedback that we heard here at this forum and before then, in months past, which is, again, people feel quite discouraged even before they come to the legislature. There's a sense of, well, my legislator won't be very sympathetic to my perspective. You know, even if I present my perspective and I'm well prepared and I have a nice fact sheet, just like HEC recommends us to do, and I have my messaging down and I'm being respectful and I'm looking nice and everything like that, I follow the whole checklist, I'm still have this dread that I'm not going to really make an impact on my legislator's way of thinking. And I was wondering if you both could please offer a very specific example in your long legislative histories of where a particular constituent came to you. Maybe they gave you testimony, maybe they gave you a fact sheet, maybe they told you a story, and it moved you and it made you rethink your position and maybe change your position. And please be specific.
You know, a few years ago, the big controversial issue was the leasing of the toll road up in northern Indiana. Folks in northern Indiana hated that thing. I was a strong supporter of it. I thought it was fantastic, and I still do to this day. However, I would go up to Goshen, Indiana. Every 2 weeks we'd have a Chamber of Commerce. There'd be about 150 people there. They'd scream and holler at me, and I'd tell them all the wonderful things this was going to do, how it was going to make us so we had money for roads. Finally, some lady stood up and says, Wolkins, you've tried to convince us this is a great idea. You haven't done it. You have a responsibility to go down there and vote the way we are asking you to. And so I came down, and I was the one Republican that voted against the lease of the toll road, even though I felt like it was a fantastic economic thing to do. And so that lady standing up in that meeting changed my mind, and I changed my vote on it.
I'm not coming up with a change my mind example right now, but I can come up with several examples of where constituents, I'm a practicing attorney. I see a lot of things come through my office, and I see, and that's where I've drawn inspiration. People come with real problems. How do you fix this? My biggest one I had several years ago was a young kid who had lost his job for a little, a few months, got behind in his mortgage payment, had his house in foreclosure, and it used to be that you could, file an appearance in the foreclosure action and call the attorney down the street and say, hey, this kid's got money now, let's work out a deal, and da-da-da-da-da. And in 2008 and 9, that just wasn't happening. And I spent 9 months trying to get an answer from the mortgage company. Now, we all know what else we can do in 9 months, but I couldn't get a phone call back from the mortgage company. And so I wrote a bill, and I got almost complete backing from both sides of the legislature, and that was one of my most successful things that I ever did. So, but it came from a real kid who just got caught up in the system.
Well, that concludes this part. We have just a 10-minute final segment, but I want to thank both Representative Wolkins and Senator Tallian. Please join me.